Good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is for you. This is Doug Woodward, and I'm so pleased to be able to bring you another episode of The Hot Seat. And tonight I've got two good friends that are going to join me here, Gary Winkleman and Bill Koenig. And I want to tell you a little bit about them, but we're just really excited to have an opportunity to share our thoughts on the issues of foreign policy and what's been happening in national politics. And I've got two guys here that know something about it because they pay a lot of attention to it, kind of like I do. Maybe they pay attention to it more than I do. But anyway, nevertheless, we're excited about this happening. So let me tell you a bit more about these two gentlemen. So first off, let me introduce you to Bill Koenig. Many of you that follow me follow Bill, and have probably even followed Bill a little bit before you started following me. Bill is an outspoken critic of a two-state solution for creating a separate Palestinian state in Israel. He wrote a best-selling book, Eye to Eye, a number of years ago, that addresses the horrendous consequences for nations, primarily America, when they or we seek to divide the land of Israel. He's appeared on Jim Bakker's show on several occasions. On one occasion, Bill indicated that COVID-19 might even be a result of the fact that we were getting ready to help separate or partition the land back on, I believe it was February 24th, 2020. Bill can explain a bit more about that. But at that same time, the COVID-19 pandemic got going. The American economy began to go down. And Donald Trump began to lose the great position that he held in the minds and really the power of in America. And so Bill will talk a bit more about that. Bill keeps his ear to the ground. Nowadays, he was actually keeping his head and his whole body in the White House for 20 years, where he was a member of the White House press corps. So he has been really right on the front row, literally, of what's been happening in national and really foreign politics as far as the United States goes for a number of years, like I said, 2 decades. So I'll stop right now and ask Bill just to talk a little bit more about his role, and then I'll jump over and tell you a little bit about Gary after Bill's done. So Bill, tell us a little bit more about the stint that you've had at the White House and how that's enabled you to become knowledgeable and able to comment on so many of these things.
Well, thanks, Doug. Great to be with you and Gary this evening. For 20 years, I've had the opportunity to see quite a bit, and a lot of my interest, for the 25 years we've had an internet news site has been Israel and God's prophetic final day plans. And it was interesting on the way to Washington, right outside of Nashville, when actually moving from Dallas, Texas, where we started our internet news service, to DC, right outside of Nashville, before I could even, the Lord put in my heart, why are you moving to Washington? And before I could even think about an answer, it was stand by Israel. And I'll remember this like it was yesterday, that directive, January 28th of, ironically, it was the 28th of 2001 when we moved here. And, it's just been a remarkable opportunity to be here to watch Bible prophecy playing out. Our American presidents have had such a significant role, all the way back to Harry Truman with supporting Israel becoming a state. Every president, when they've been involved in Israel and the Middle East, there's been consequences, but at the same time, they kind of kick the prophetic can down the road where we get closer and closer to those final day events that the scriptures speak of. So that's, being here, Doug, like most of my focus continues to be Israel and the Middle East. And, being there at the White House for all Ariel Sharon's meetings, Netanyahu's meetings, traveling to the Middle East with President Bush in 2008 to Israel and 5 Arab countries was a great experience. And then, having traveled to Israel over 30 times in the last 20 years also, we have a lot of good contacts on the Israeli side as well in government and in the media. So classic example of someone that keeps an eye on the biblical significance of what is taking place in Israel, and obviously the state of or the United States has had a very significant role, especially the White House, in bringing these final day events to the point that they are today, which we'll address this evening.
Yes, fantastic. Great. Let me introduce everyone to Gary Winkleman. He is a mutual friend of Bill and I. He's affectionately known as Wink, at least by Bill. I don't call him Wink too often, although I did try to get him to do a continuing show with me. We're going to call it the Wink and Woody Show. Never have been able to put that together. Wink has been too busy for me, but that's okay. So Gary's done extensive research, I would say, on the clandestine politics of the United States for many, many years. He reported to a guy named H.R. Haldeman, former chief of staff to Richard Nixon. You guys remember him, I bet. And he was doing this in Moscow, if memory serves, around 1994, 1995. This was at the same time when the Russian military decided they would attack the Russian Parliament building, which was literally across the street from some of the properties that Gary was actually managing on behalf of the, well, Gary will explain kind of what was going on there with this fantastic plan, which was, I don't know if this was called part of the American Century or whatever it was called, in which the plan was for the United States to teach Russia how to go about the process of commercializing its interests and so forth. And so Gary was there in Moscow when this event happened. Gary can tell you a bit more about that. And then Gary found out later in life that a couple of people that he was working with, and one of the fellows that was working for him, were actually CIA agents. So, you know, that's always encouraging to figure out, now what does this mean? The CIA are actually working under me and around me and so forth. So a lot of stories there. So he has great insights into the Boris Yeltsin transition period into the Putin era. Could talk a lot about Bill Clinton and his relationship with Russian oligarchs. And so he's got some great information that we could call inside baseball. And Gary, more in the last few years, has busied himself with following George Webb around the internet, and has spent some time with George. And George, as many of you know, is an investigative journalist that's basically upset a lot of people, including, I think, Forbes magazine and Time magazine and some other people regarding CNN, regarding his claims about things. And so, yeah, so let me turn over, Gary, talk a couple of minutes, if you would, about your time in Moscow, and then a couple of minutes about your time with George Webb.
Sure. Well, good to be with you guys, old friends. In fact, to tie this together of how I ended up in Moscow actually begins probably back with Bill, almost 30 years ago. Bill and I had careers as commercial real estate brokers before he followed his journalism career and went to DC. I think I had just left for Russia in about 93. Bill, when did you go to DC?
Actually 2001, Gary, but we started our internet news service in 95, right after, right, yes.
Right. So basically, God led Bill and I in different paths. We were in commercial real estate together. We actually took a sabbatical during the S&L crisis when the Resolution Trust Corporation came in. That, of course, was just a monopoly play by the banks to get rid of the S&Ls and have a monopoly. That, of course, led to the derivative scandal under the Obama administration that bankrupted the world in 08, 09, and 10. But other than that, things were great. But the real estate side of this was that I was leasing up the office mixed-use development projects here in Orange County, California, for some illustrious developers. And I had met a guy by the name of Paul Tatum that was going to go to Russia and duplicate that. And he had partnered up with, Paul was out of Oklahoma, by the way, where you're from. And
grew up about 10 miles from where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah. And yeah, that's another side story too. He dated Mary Fallon, the former governor. They were college sweethearts.
Yeah.
Down there. But anyway, Paul got his claws into me and said, "You're my guy, and you need to come to Russia with me. We're going to be the next Donald Trumps." You know, I said, "Okay, look, I'll come look. No guarantee. You know, I'm going to fly over and I'll kick the tires, but no guarantees." Well, of course, I get there, and the first night I'm there, ushered into a boardroom at about 11 o'clock at night to have a late dinner. And I walk in the room and there's two gentlemen in the room. It's kind of dimly lit. I couldn't see very well. And they stand up and I walk in and Paul, hey, how was your flight? Good to see you. By the way, let me introduce you to Bob Haldeman.
Oh, that guy.
You know, my vision of him was a crew cut in the 70s when I was in high school, right?
Exactly.
He had longer hair, but he had the same kind of stature. And by God, it was Bob Haldeman, you know, nice to meet you, sir. So, you know, that ended up in a couple of weeks of running around Moscow with Bob Haldeman, where he explained to me that he had left the White House and worked for Jay Pritzker in Chicago and became a hotel guy. So he ran the Hyatt hotels. And I had the office mixed use development stuff out here with Cole Company, Irvine Company, and so forth. So Haldeman sets me down and said, Gary, look, you're a friend of Paul. Somebody needs to be here that's got Paul's back. You're the real estate expert. I'm the hotel guy. And basically, I have a management and know-how agreement with the Soviet Interest Hotel System, which was Aeroflot, Interest Hotels, and the buses. It was all one company over there. And our mission was to convert every one of those properties from Vladivostok almost to Poland into a fashion island here in Newport Beach, or any of the mixed use high-rise office, theater, you know, entertainment centers that you see all across the country in the United States. So we were going to be on the cover of Time magazine, didn't quite make it. Paul was assassinated November 3rd of 1996. I had resigned and come back to the United States because people were whispering in my ear with CIA connections that a bouncing grenade has no friends. So I followed that advice and I came back to Newport. I was working for Jack Kemp's brother, Tom, on the U.S. Committee to Assist Russian Reform. That was through the Pepperdine University, funded by USAID. But on the 3rd of November, they murdered Paul in Moscow. I was paged. The U.S. election was going on. Clinton prevailed and won over Bob Dole and Jack Kemp. I had already gone to the office, Tom Kemp's office, and called the FBI and went after the mayor of Moscow and Umar Dobrovolov, a mafia thug that was a tenant in the building for the murder of Paul. So I had to resign. I didn't want to bring any kind of collateral damage against the Kemp family. And I didn't think we'd have any more funding for our project as a result of Clinton coming into office. So that led me to Moscow.
Yeah,
So.
It's an incredible story, and we've gone into it in more depth, and in and of itself, it's worth Gary and I just debriefing a bit on another show sometime in the future.
Yep.
Gary, talk for a couple of minutes about your following George Webb and
Sure.
what you think of old George and McDuff, Mr. I guess it's John O'Donnell.
Just so I kind of connect the dots here.
Yeah.
In my childhood, you know, little kids, 7, 8, 9 years old have big ears, and you're supposed to be not seen and go to your room. But I wasn't very good at that. And I used to overhear a lot of conversations. And one of those was my father being recruited into the Bay of Pigs in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so that probably started this whole chain of events. And then, of course, in Moscow, I find out that a general manager that reported to me, geez, this was years later, 2008, in Costco, I find a book called A Train to Batevka by a Michael Ramsdell. And I pick the book up and I look and there's a picture of Michael Ramsdell. And I go, wait a minute, this guy reported to me in Moscow. That was back in 93 through 96. This is 2008.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going, what the hell's going on here? Excuse me. And the caption on the cover of the book is, you know, America's greatest spy in Russia. And Reagan had sent Mike in with a crew to kidnap, quote unquote, kidnap some Russian mafia contractors that had ripped off the United States for about, $7 billion to construct a new embassy. And when they did the walkthrough inspection, they found out that the walls were turned into listening devices. It wasn't just listening devices put into the wall. The wall was a listening device.
Yes.
Right. That's what that whole book is about. And I'm going, wait a minute, this guy reported to me, you know. And then there was another episode that's an important piece with George Webb here, was Ed Dearborn. And I just found out last week Ed passed away. So I can really talk about things that I've not been able to talk about.
Yes.
But Ed was one of the key founders of Air America under General Secord. Peter Dale Scott has written extensively about this in a book called The Road to 9/11, but it shows where Air America, which was Ed found all the pilots and Secord got the airplanes. But these guys were, they were in Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. They were in the Congo. They were everywhere.
They were like in Laos for like 20 years or something, weren't they?
They ran the opium trade.
Yeah. And of course, we didn't do that. And, the CIA had nothing to do with that, I'm sure. Right?
This is all controversial. This has to do with what? Gary Webb, the reporter from the San Jose Mercury News that was assassinated.
Well, he was assassinated.
Suicided.
Yeah. So did Ed actually recruit Mel Gibson and Robert Downey Jr. for Air America?
This is a funny thing. I will say Ed always denied that there were ever any drugs flown on his airplanes.
Amazing.
But I sat down at breakfast with Ed and said, somebody was flying drugs on your airplanes. Whether it was on your airplane, I don't know, but drugs were definitely involved.
Yes.
And so I didn't go looking for this. This has just been kind of my path in life, that God's exposed me to a bunch of this stuff. And I've been able to later go back with the internet and start to unravel things and connect the dots. I watched a movie the other night on Jardoville in South Africa.
Yeah. Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Well, that's all. I couldn't figure out why Ed Dearborn was on the cover of Life magazine in an airplane. He had an open cockpit and somebody was above him and took a photo down of him and he's looking up. I couldn't figure out what was Ed doing in the Congo. Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam made sense. Korea made sense. Mm-hmm. The Iran-Contra affair, where his pilot, Gene Hockenfuss, his two pilots were killed. Gene Hockenfuss was the CIA agent that got captured.
Oh, okay.
Didn't eat the black book with George Bush Sr.'s phone number in it.
Uh-oh. So
Ronald Reagan, right?
Like I said, Gary, the stories you've got.
I know.
We can spend an hour and a half, and we will soon. So just mention a little bit about George Webb, and you're following him.
Oh, thanks for bringing me back. Yeah, I met George. I got very curious. When the Russia coup thing started with Donald Trump,
right?
I just called nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same school.
Yes, right. Yes.
20 years later,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And George was investigating this, and I thought everything he was reporting resonated with what I knew. Mm-hmm. And I knew a lot more about Ed Dearborn. And so I found George Webb. His real name Schweigert, as he is. Wow. That's public information.
Yeah, yeah.
But I ran him down, and I got him on the phone, and we traded some notes. And he validated everything I knew, and I validated everything he knew, and that started a 5-year. I was kind of a backdoor journalist. I was a backdoor researcher.
Yeah.
Running down all the loose ends that George was reporting in his videos.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's been, of course, every so often I had to have a debrief with you to say, now, this George guy confuses me because he talks in circles, It's so I've 2 or 3 times I volunteered my services as a writer because I think this poor guy, he can't, he just talks and thinks in stream of consciousness, but
he has so much information. His storyboarding, when he was using the storyboards, it made it a lot easier.
Made it easier, didn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So, but a great guy. Well, as you can see, folks, 2 very interesting guys that we're going to talk to tonight. So we're probably we'll see how this goes. We're not going to go past 90 minutes, but we'll see if we run out of things to talk about. I doubt it. So, well, let's talk first off, Bill, let's bring it back to you. Run us down a little bit, kind of the state of things that are going on in Israel. This is a love of yours, so I bet you stay extremely close to what's happening. Give us an update and I really want you to, of course, focus some on how will things change, in terms of your thinking about the new administration. How will Biden change the relationship with Israel? And let's kind of dig into that as the first subject we'll focus on in depth here.
Well, I think President Trump was the best friend that Israel's ever had in the White House. The things that he did for Israel, the moving of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, were all what Clinton and Bush and Obama promised it. Trump did it. People at the State Department, John Kerry and others, publicly, Arab leaders were saying this is the biggest mistake you'll ever make. Nothing happened. It was a bold move. The fact that they acknowledged Israel's right and sovereignty to the Golan Heights was very significant, because in Obama's last year, they, along with the international community, chastised Netanyahu when he talked about the Golan Heights being a part of Israel. And that's a very, very important part of Israel from a strategic and defensive perspective. And then Secretary of State Pompeo, after a year of legal study, said that Israel has the right to develop and build those communities. They're called the settlements, but there's 132 Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, and Secretary Pompeo said those are legal. And then also the United States leaving the International Criminal Court. They said, no way, we're not going to stay involved. UN Human Rights Council, same thing. You're chastising our friend Israel, and we don't like the way you're handling your affairs. And then one of the most significant is taking on the nuclear agreement that Obama, Kerry, and it was P5+1, Germany, France, Russia, UK, and the United States planned, but it was basically brokered by Kerry and Obama. A bad deal, terribly bad deal. Basically gave Iran $150 billion, money that we had of theirs in the bank, and I think it was 5 or 6 billion on a plane. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I think so. I want to make, you mentioned something in the introduction, is everything was going so smoothly for President Trump, incredibly smoothly, and he had that favor, that incredible favor. But even if it's President Trump, when you talk about dividing the land of Israel, dividing Judea and Samaria, and creating an Arab state, we heard about this deal of the century that his son-in-law Jared Kushner was brokering. And unfortunately, January 28th of last year is the day that he actually introduced his plan at the White House. Excuse me. And he had a map that superimposed the boundaries of the Bible in Genesis 15:18. There's specific boundaries of the covenant land, the Abrahamic covenant land of Israel. And President Trump established a map. And from that point forward, things got extremely difficult for him, for Israel, for the international community. Within 24 hours of him establishing that plan of January 28 last year, he established his first coronavirus advisory group, because all of a sudden he was very concerned. At that point, there was only a couple cases in the United States of coronavirus, January 28th of last year. But Senator Cotton, Peter Navarro says, we got a big problem. This is an incredibly contagious pathogen. We better do something. So immediately after the very interesting timing of establishing his committee, or establishing the plan, he established his committee. And I wrote a commentary, Life in America before January 28th last year, and life in America after, and in Israel, and in the Middle East, and as well as the world. So it's just distinctively different. And unfortunately, the Biden plan is going to be very similar to the Obama effort. It's basically Obama 2.0. And they're not very excited about it. Israel's, having an election on March 23rd. So they're very concerned about this new administration.
A lot of questions that come to mind there. I guess one of the first is Biden talks a tough game right now in terms of saying, gee, we are going to make sure that Iran becomes compliant before we lift any sanctions, and kind of before we get compliant. Do you think that that's just an opening salvo, in that Biden will buckle in terms of his pushing back on Iran at this time?
First of all, Iranians are master negotiators. There's an Iranian fellow here in DC told me a couple of years ago. He says these guys get masters and PhDs in negotiations, and you can't out negotiate them.
Yeah.
I was at the Israeli embassy a few years ago here in Washington DC, and one of the leaders over there says you can't out negotiate Iranians. They're masters. and they'll agree to something, and then you'll come public with it, and they'll change the deal right after you've come public saying you've worked something out with them. They will wear you out. And they saw how much Obama and John Kerry wanted to have something. And they played those guys as well as those Europeans like a fiddle. They just flat out negotiated them.
Yeah.
I mean, Khomeini's already saying right now, okay, yeah, you need to give us money. And I even heard the number $1 trillion. Those sanctions cost us $1 trillion. So we want money. Oh, these guys are going to wear these Biden negotiators out.
Yeah.
They'll get nowhere. They'll get nowhere, Doug. It's going to be a joke to follow.
I can believe it. Well, and I guess the in terms of what happens next with Iran, the question that came to my mind was, what will Netanyahu do, and how soon will he do it, relative to potentially attacking Iran? What do you think the threat is there? You've been to Israel 30 times, and I don't know if you ever met Netanyahu.
Oh yes, couple times.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a master negotiator himself.
Right.
And thankfully for Netanyahu, he's with his presentations at the UN and his public acknowledgement of the threat of Iran, the world community probably wouldn't have a clue, or they wouldn't take it serious. We take it serious, especially our Sunni Arab allies in the Middle East. Take it very serious. But first of all, Netanyahu's up for an election. Now they got another election. This will be the fourth election in 2 years. They're a parliament, and trying to run the Israeli government as a prime minister of an Israeli parliament is it's quite an accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
to be able to. What's interesting, he's been in office for about 12 years. I mean, the guy he's a master. He's a master. And
amidst all of these points about his corruption and so forth, he still seems to wade through all that, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. Well, there's like 3 or 4 major cases, case 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000. And this has been going on for a while. Omer had one case, and he collapsed his government, never ran for office again, ended up serving time. Netanyahu has got top legal help, and he's the face of Israel worldwide. Yes. Speaks great English. He's very well liked.
Well, he grew up in was it Philadelphia? Was it Pennsylvania?
Philadelphia area. And I think he got one of his degrees from MIT. So his dad passed away a couple of years ago. He was a scholar, a Bible scholar, a biblical scholar at 100 years of age. And so he loves the land of Israel. He knows the land of Israel. He knows the importance of the land of Israel. Mm-hmm. And, Israel, every week or two, every couple of weeks, goes in there and knocks out Iranian weapons inside of Syria. And but they're master chess players. The Iranians are sharp. Israelis are sharp. It's like Claire Lopez, who works in Frank Gaffney, said, it's not by chance that the Chinese, the Persians, and the Jews have survived the centuries, because they're that smart.
Literally the millenniums, like 5.
Yeah. I mean, they've been around for a bit.
They have been around for a bit.
Yeah, and the other thing is, Israel's got the God of Israel, the true God,
amen,
God of Israel, on their side. So, first of all, the elections, March 23rd. A lot of posturing going on right now. You got to develop a coalition in order to form a government. The right wing mandate's been pretty strong. That's why they've been able to form a government. But last time, Netanyahu had to bring Gantz into his government in order to develop that coalition. And Netanyahu outfoxed him, and Gantz's political career is in question. He was politically shrewd. I guess the bottom line is, Netanyahu, to the Jewish and the Christian world, is a great defender of the state of Israel, and he's very pragmatic. Iran is, some of the Sunnis in the Middle East obviously are very worried about a nuclear Iran. And even some people in the Middle East says that Israel will be the first to be hit by the nuke, and the Saudis will be the second. Well, some of the insiders in the intel circle say, no, the Saudis will be hit first.
Right.
I mean, that bad blood between the Shia and Sunni Islam. So, this is right out of Bible prophecy, Ezekiel 38:39, Jeremiah 49. We're watching the final day countries align, Doug, Turkey, Iran, Russia, Israel being the center of it all. I don't know. This could be a very pivotal year because of who we have in the White House here in Washington, D.C., and also the situation that Iran might be given a little bit of rope and get them off the ropes right now and become very, very problematic. They're just a very problematic foe.
No question. Gary, any comment before I change the subject slightly?
No, nobody knows more about this than Bill. I mean, I drink out of his newsletter every week. So
Right. Yeah, he knows a lot. Bill, when did you write the book Eye to Eye?
First edition was 2004, and then it was updated in 2006, and then updated again in 2017, the summer of 2017, where I got President Trump's first 7 or 8 months in office. Okay. And Eye to Eye basically documents 127 record-setting catastrophes that happen usually the same day or within 24 hours of U.S. presidents applying pressure on Israel to divide their covenant land. Right. 9/11, perfect storm, Katrina, the COVID crisis, on and on. It's just, right. And we've had, even with Trump's great support of Israel, there was 8 record-setting hurricanes during the time his son-in-law was working on the Trump peace plan, and also last summer when they were working on the Abraham Accords. We had 6 record-setting hurricanes last summer.
No world leader has the right to divide the covenant land of Israel. Those who attempt to will face significant consequences.
Let us hope that this Conference of Madrid will mark the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the Middle East.
إن سوريا تسعى إلى السلام العادل والشامل مع إسرائيل كخيار استراتيجي.
My vision is 2 states, living side by side in peace and security. Again, I applaud Prime Minister Sharon for making a decision that has really changed the dynamics on the ground and has really provided hope for the Palestinian people.
I said that the United States believes that negotiations should result in 2 states, with permanent Palestinian borders with Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. The only way for Israel to endure and thrive as a Jewish and democratic state is through the realization of an independent and viable Palestine.
The President is very committed to achieving a solution here that will be able to bring prosperity and peace to all people in this area.
It's a great honor to be with the King of Jordan.
Hurricane Maria, it blasted Puerto Rico today with sustained winds of 155 miles an hour.
So, for people that have had to experience these events, it's hard to comprehend. But I've noticed the greater the pressure on Israel to divide their covenant land, the greater the corresponding catastrophe.
Yep.
Bill, interject.
Yeah,
just a current. What happened in Texas here the last couple of weeks? What was that supernatural? That was the supernatural in-kind response, the judgment, if you will, on America. But wasn't that Biden coming out supporting the 2-state solution again?
Oh yeah,
And
about 5 things, Gary. Yeah, first of all, the 2-state plan. They came out stating publicly that they supported fully the 2-state plan. At the UN, they did the same thing, said that we fully favor the 2-state plan. They started sending money to the Palestinians again.
Yep.
Then they re-engaged with the International Criminal Courts, who is after Israel. I mean, they are after Israel. And then they are re-engaging with the UN Human Rights Council, and they're opening up negotiations with Iran. All of that was within a short period of time. And then this record setting. I mean, Texas is probably one of the most supportive states in the country when it comes to Israel, and many Christians supporters of Israel in Texas. And our friends, Gary, you have friends there, and you know, I lived there 22 years. It's devastating. I mean, this is an event, 100-year event. Some meteorologist says this is a 500-year event. But unfortunately, all those things Biden did was right at the time of this record-setting event that hit Texas. $50 billion event. It connects all the dots of a typical eye-to-eye event, and they've continued ever since. I mean, even yesterday, Blinken's talking to the Palestinians and talking to the Iranians. We need to start moving on this now on the two-state plan.
Yeah, the new Secretary of State, Blinken, right?
Yes, correct.
Is it Lincoln, Blinken, and Nod, or what was it?
Just for the audience to understand this, two things, Bill. You know, mainstream media is so sold out to the narrative that this is all tied to climate change, and you know, has nothing to do with God or supernatural in-kind response to putting pressure on Israel to divide the land for peace. And if you could maybe reiterate that, because I don't think people understand what the two-state solution means when you divide the land for peace.
Well, that's a great point. The two-state plan means that there will be an Arab state in the biblical heartland of Israel, which is Judea and Samaria. And every time a U.S. president or even an international leader attempts to move forward to that, a catastrophic event happens, usually in the United States, because we're the point man in the peace process. But this has happened to Merkel and Macron and Tony Blair and Boris Johnson. It's happened to European leaders as well as Russian leaders too, when they got involved in trying or publicly saying, we're going to pressure Israel to comply with creating this Arab state of Judea and Samaria. And we have these enormous record-setting events every time. It never fails. And that's last summer, speaking of global warming, that's what they're blaming, these record-setting hurricanes and that fire, that warm weather that you all experienced in California last summer.
We love it.
That was right at the time they were putting the big squeeze on the Abraham Accord. They were talking about extending sovereignty for Israel for 132 Jewish communities. But the international community and the Middle East leaders said, no, don't do this. Don't do that. Stop. We'll never have peace if you do that. So unfortunately, Jared Kushner made the decision, we're going to stop extending this sovereignty, and we're going to put that in the back burner, and we're going to go do the Abraham Accords. Every bit of effort, when they were putting effort on the Abraham Accords, we were having record-setting hurricanes. When they would stop their effort, take a break or two for a couple of weeks or a month, everything would calm. As soon as they started back up, it happened again, 6 different times. And on the day of the signing of the Abraham Accord last September 15, Hurricane Sally was coming against the southern Gulf Coast. This is the Abraham Accords at the White House. What the derivative of Sally is the name Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah. And the Lord put it in my heart. Okay, this is an example. I mean, that storm could have been called anything, but it was called Sarah. Sally, meaning Sarah. So it's like the Lord was saying, that land, the Abrahamic land, is for the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Sarah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Jacob, and their descendants. Not Ishmael, not Hagar.
Let's talk about China. China is, of course, an enormous issue for just about everyone in the world, but particularly for the United States. What do you think? What are your guys' thoughts about, what might we expect in the way of the U.S.-China relationship over, let's say, the next 6 months. What are your thoughts?
The cover up of the Wuhan flu and 500,000 dead Americans. What was his name, Bill? The guy that wrote
Dr. Francis Boyle.
Yeah, Dr. Francis Boyle. Well, Webb was reporting on him as well, and then you and I crossed lines on that as well. I think Alex Jones reported on this with Francis Boyle as well. But look,
Yes.
This thing went through I majored in genetics in college 50 years ago.
You did? Wow.
I did. Biology and genetics is kind of a pre-med that thing.
Yeah.
So I was very familiar with how DNA, RNA synthesis occurs and all of that stuff. But the bottom line was that, and Bill can talk in a lot more detail here, but this thing came out of Fort Detrick, Maryland's Army Bioweapons Lab. It came out of the University of North Carolina, level 4. We compartmentalize this stuff like we did the atom bomb. We do big R, or big research in academia. We do development. When we get the thing all done, we go assemble it someplace like Area 51 or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And in this case, it was Wuhan, which was a WHO laboratory. There was a piece of this that came from the Winnipeg, Canada WHO lab. But all this stuff got financed by Barack Obama, actually, originally. Fauci wrote the checks for it through NIH. And this whole thing went through a CRISPR DNA slice and dice Vegematic, put it all together and created it. And it was in a refrigerator somewhere. Now, they tried to get us to believe that this was on this bat soup
in the market.
Right? Well, somebody took it out of the lab and put it in the bat soup, right? And this is where Webb fingered a military, they had a military games over there. There was
the military games. It was in Wuhan in October, I believe.
George drilled down that she was patient 0.
Yeah.
Name was Nancy, right? And all of the U.S. athletes that competed in the games were sick. Most of them didn't even compete. She did extremely poorly in the games, but they thought,
a cyclist, if I remember right.
Yes, that's right. She was a cyclist, and she was thought to be the carrier. And she was actually a driver or an attaché for one of the top UN generals in
NATO general.
NATO general.
Yeah.
And when you track back the whole coup against Trump, it's NATO, the Queen's Privy Council, the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. It's all tied together, and that's a big, dark rabbit hole.
I stayed in contact with Dr. Francis Boyle. He was the attorney that drafted the 1989 Bioterrorism Act that was unanimously approved during George Herbert Walker Bush's time of office.
He signed it.
And
the New York Times published an article a number of years ago saying that Fauci had funded his agency, NIAID, going back to Reagan and his neocons, all this hideous Nazi biological warfare weapons work. 95% of it was funded by Fauci, including research coming out of that Wuhan BSL-4, which we have to understand. This Wuhan BSL-4 is like the United States Fort Detrick or Britain's Porton Down. And I think your viewers understand that both Fort Detrick and Porton Down have been involved in every type of hideous Nazi biological warfare work you can possibly imagine on the face of the earth from the get-go.
And he's been saying all along this is a manufactured in that Wuhan lab, which is a level 4 lab. It's like Fort Detrick's a level 4. And there's only so many of them around the world.
Half dozen.
And a little bit more than that. I think we got 4 or 5, maybe up to 6 here in the U.S. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
But the country, I think China only has 1. We've got multiple. Russia has 1. I think Israel, France, UK. It's self-protection. In the event someone else comes up with a pathogen, but and this is you're establishing a bioweapon, and this there's no doubt about this. This is a sloppy facility. This is where SARS originally came out of back in the early 2000s, and very sloppy facility. The State Department had been warned that we need to keep an eye on this facility because it's very they're just sloppy. They do things. Look what happened with SARS. It leaked out of that facility. It didn't come out of this fish lab or fish market.
Right.
It came out of that lab. Even Secretary of State Pompeo says that. A lot of the research has said that. What's interesting now is a lot of the truth is coming out by mainstream media that did not want to. And this was a great perspective I heard 2 days ago. They're now interested in it now that Trump is not in office. But Fauci was able to still get the $3.5 million through another contact of his to go in and fund this facility, this gain of function facility. Gain of function basically means taking a virus or pathogen and making it a weapons grade.
Weaponizing it.
Yeah.
It was
And they were able to.
highly contagious with a very low lethality.
Yes,
okay.
that's been the blessing of this. Incredibly contagious,
So
but
far.
low lethality,
Yeah.
low mortality rate. They were able to obtain some of the Dietrich stuff. Ended up with Dr. Barrick at University of North Carolina.
Yes.
One of the experts from China, this lady was working with Barrick at the University of North Carolina. They supposedly were able to abscond some information that helped them in developing this bioweapon. And what's really come down, there's so much more detail than this, but the bottom line right now, Doug, is the question is, was this intentionally let out or was this accidental? Either way, it created havoc. We are finding out that China was already working on a vaccine at the end of 2019. There's a Harvard photo of this hospital in Wuhan in 2018. Very few cars in the parking lot. 2019, the place was packed out. This was August of 2019. And then the Olympics, as Gary mentioned, the Wuhan Olympics. This was military people from over 100 countries came to Wuhan for 10 days, and contagious. Went to France, went to Sweden, Spain, Italy.
Well, they all
and
jumped on the plane and they all spread the virus all over the world. Discussion about, I think, a heavy Chinese community in Florence, Italy, that was is it Milan? Okay, that they were heavily represented in Wuhan, and that their return to Italy was one of the reasons why Italy was one of the first major outbreaks of the virus. So it seems like there's absolutely no question that the military games were instrumental in the rapid spread of the virus.
And then once it was spread within Wuhan, what was happening was the garment workers in Wuhan were going to Milan, which is where all the fashions are created in Italy, like the Italy garment district here. The connection between Wuhan and Milan was Chinese going back and forth from Wuhan to Milan. So they spread it all over Italy. Wow. Now, the irony of this was the doctors there thought they were treating some rare flu. And the protocol for that was to put a patient on a ventilator and force air into the lung to resuscitate. Right. And what the Italian doctors ended up doing was killing their patients by forcing air into the lung. Hemoglobin had bonded to the receptor site where the oxygen molecule should have been. So part of this cytokine storm, the way this process worked, the alveoli of the lung where you diffuse oxygen between the tissue, it was occupied by hemoglobin. The oxygen could not get there, and they suffocated these guys, or they just compressed so much air into their chest that they destroyed the lung tissue.
Right. Absolutely.
Trying to figure out, how do we get this gunk, this glass-like liquid slime off of the lung tissue so that we can get oxygen perfused through the body? And they couldn't figure it out.
Right. What was a little bit of a sidebar, but what was Webb's theory about why NATO was, you might say, behind the spread of this, or sort of somehow supporting the spread of the virus?
Well, we fought a revolution in 1776 and we're still fighting it.
Mm-hmm. That's one way to explain it. But go ahead, expand on that point.
There's a lot of people. I mean, the LaRouche PAC people have done a great job of publishing this. aimfortruth.org has been publishing this. Lots of internet podcast guys have been on it. Britain, NATO, look, nobody wanted nationalism. Nobody wanted, they wanted their new world order. They thought Hillary was just going to be anointed, and we were going to do away with the Constitution, Christianity, and our Bill of Rights, and we were just going to go quietly into the new world order. This goes into the Bible prophecy thing. Is America in the Bible? Well, no, it's not. Well, why is that? Well, it talks about a new world order.
Yeah.
So,
well, what's interesting along that line, as far as the world order, Gary, we talked about this, is Bill Gates, the World Economic Forum, and Johns Hopkins University had a big event called Event 201.
Oh, yeah, big time. This is huge.
In October of 2019 in New York City, and it was an all-day event on a exercise of how to handle a pandemic that ended up of this nature, of this size. This was an event 201, event 201. You can go to Google and pull it up, and they were having an exercise on how to mitigate a worldwide pandemic like this that happened, started 90 days or so later. Incredible, very interesting timing.
It is. And if you think about this, Bill, we were running military exercises the same way the day of 9/11.
Yes, actually, a test of our ability to respond to a disaster like this.
Exactly.
The stuff is not accidental, I'll tell you.
No, it's demonic. It's diabolical.
Demonic, and it's not coincidence.
No, there's no way. It's supernatural synchronicity, but from the bad guy.
Yeah, but from the bad. But let's talk about the Bidens and Hunter Biden, and what are our thoughts on how will in effect Biden deal with China? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think look, we know he's compromised, for God's sakes. I mean, the Hunter Biden thing was so obvious. Nobody wanted to report on it, right? I mean, come on.
Do we think that the reporters are, do we think the reporters are sort of on the cusp of digging into it now that Trump's out of the way? What are our thoughts?
No, it's going to go away. Look, like Bill and I used to talk about, what's the score, Bill? 52-0? We've won nothing in 5 years. Trump won no battles, none, right? What happened to Hillary's emails? What happened to Weiner's laptop? What happened? Okay. We haven't won one battle, except for the pardons that Trump put out to say enough's enough.
Right.
So if you think anything's going to happen to the Democrats or to Biden or to China or to anybody else that's playing ball in this global military industrial congressional complex that Eisenhower so famously quipped about.
Yes.
No, it's business as usual, boys.
No hopium, as some people are calling it these days. What are your thoughts, Bill? Go ahead and jump in, please.
Well, it's all is fitting together very nicely, for the lack of a better word. I think that's probably the best way to frame this is what the Lord has given us in terms of one world political order, one world religious order, one world currency, final day alignment of nations, the lack of a distinctive role for the United States in final day prophecy. The epicenter is the state of Israel and Jerusalem. So all this is coming together quite nicely. Nicely is probably not the right word. It's all fitting together quite well. I'll put it that way. It's not real nice, but
it's an unfortunate way for the United States.
It's right on schedule.
Yes.
Yeah, right on schedule. And I think we're talking about the digital currency now. We're talking about these silly mass.
The
Great Reset.
The Great Reset, the World Economic Forum. Go to their website. It's not like they're trying to hide it.
No.
This Catherine Austin Fitts that Gary told me about has nailed it.
She's amazing, isn't she?
She's fantastic. If you want to really understand what's going on, I suggest everybody watch that interview she did. You could put Catherine Austin Fitts in Google and pull it up. And matter of fact, I looked at it tonight. Her YouTube version was, of course, taken down.
Yes.
But the people you originally did the interview with, you can go to that website. But I went through it numerous times, and I think it's the greatest example. She says, she calls it Mr. Global.
Yeah.
She says that they use events like this, like the war on terror, like the coronavirus pandemic, and they take more and more control away from your life. And Biden's Treasury Secretary spoke of a digital currency. And then 48 hours later, Jerome Powell is talking about, the Federal Reserve Chairman's talking about the digital dollar that we're heading towards. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, within 48 hours.
They have to move very quickly because Bitcoin is skyrocketing, because you have major corporations, already Tesla, Apple, soon to put billions of dollars into Bitcoin. Bitcoin is moving rapidly. And this, of course, is probably the single biggest thing that could upset the apple cart for the banksters.
That's why we heard this. That's why we heard this week from both Yellen and Powell for that reason.
Bingo.
No doubt.
Exactly.
No doubt about it.
Yep.
All of a sudden, Bitcoin's in the 56,000 range.
Yes.
That's, practically almost doubled. Yeah. Bitcoin. And there's going to be other currencies besides Bitcoin. But now that you got PayPal and Square and the big banks and others, I mean, JP Morgan Chase looking at their own coin process. I mean, it's going to be a lot of competition amongst them all. But like you said, Apple and Tesla, MasterCard, Visa gave it credibility.
Right. Well, of course,
more credibility.
Finance is the area I've kind of become more adroit, I guess, with. But it's very likely that Bitcoin is a major fly in the ointment for these folks because it's independent. It's not officially capturable by any of the nation states. All kinds of reasons why it stands as a preferred digital currency, but ultimately it's going to, there's a couple of really smart guys I listen to frequently. Ultimately, it's going to probably come down to Bitcoin versus a global central bank digital currency.
Interesting.
And so it's probably going to come down to those two. And this one guy, Simon Dixon, who's brilliant little South African. I don't think he lives in South Africa anymore, but he's absolutely brilliant. Not only is he super smart, he's super easy to understand. And so, in terms of the Great Reset, this is where we're coming to a major war, probably within the next 12 months over this issue of digital currency. And the dollar is collapsing. It will give way for sure.
I tell you what, I think what's going to, this 12 months could be very pivotal. And I think a lot of that too is this coronavirus, these variants, the UK, South Africa, Brazil variants. And my European friends, I mean, they're in lockdown. The Germans are in extreme lockdowns. My friends in the Netherlands, Ireland, UK, they just came out of it. I heard a guy interviewed today from France. I mean, they are going overboard on the lockdown. And then, so our cases have dropped in about half. I'm sure there's a lot of flu cases, but we're right around 55,000 cases a day. I think it is right now. That's dropped in half and even more than half. But I think the concern that we have is these other variants coming. But it's also motivating Biden and the Faucis of the world to get as many people vaccinated as fast as possible. The Moderna and the Pfizer chairman were in Capitol Hill this week, and they said we can provide 600 million vaccines by the end of July. And that's that mRNA. Johnson & Johnson was basically went through their initial approval today. They're getting pretty close to getting their approval. Right. It's not built on that platform. Gary would know more about that, but it's more traditional. This mRNA is very, very worrisome.
Yeah, it's an area that I wrote a paper on and did a video on this last week. So I'm kind of up to speed on that recently. But yes, Johnson & Johnson they're likely to get their vaccine approved, and it is a more traditional vaccine in terms of dealing with more like an attenuated case of COVID-19 as opposed to the mRNA messenger talking to our DNA.
The problem with the J&J, if I saw Bill's newsletter on Friday correctly, is that it will not work on the variants.
That's what they think. That's what I understand. Is that right, Bill?
Well, yeah, that's what I heard Gary last week, and then today they're saying they're about 64% against our current variants here in the U.S. I think they're at a 50% level with the Brazilian and the South African. So the numbers that Johnson & Johnson came out with today are a bit better than,
the 66, 67%, I think.
Yeah, in that 50-60 range. In Israel, most of what Israel took was the Pfizer mRNA, and they're supposedly having a 94% success. But us on this call are worried about what happens when you get the cold, or what happens when you get COVID again, what happens when you get just a bronchitis. That is just tampering. You guys know more about this than I do, but
then you have a defense against it.
Well, it's a complicated issue. It's called viral interference, right. And it's one of the things that is for those that are anti-vaxxers, this is the thing that they're really fear mongering about, and it may really be a genuine issue, or it may not. But there's samples, some sample size work that's been done that says it could be a problem. So if a variant hits us, it could be devastating. So that's one of the worries we have yet. Those of us that have gotten the vaccine, and I have gotten the vaccine, by the way.
Which one did you got? The Pfizer?
The Pfizer. Yeah, I got the Pfizer one. Yeah. So I did a lot of research and decided for a variety of reasons that it was probably it was the better bet. And I wrote a paper on it. So if you guys are interested in why I make that decision, I decided that you had 1,000 times better chance of 1,000 times greater chance of dying from the virus than you did from the vaccine. So I decided I'd take the vaccine. Well, let me move. I want to move one last question on China. Then I want us to kind of bridge over to some of the more fun, speculative issues. Let's talk a little bit about China and Taiwan and the South China Sea and some of those issues. To what extent have you all been following, that question? Now, of course, the whole issue of the one China thing and whether or not China would one day attack Taiwan. That's been something we've seen since we were kids, just about. So any thoughts in terms of what's likely to happen with the U.S. Navy and China, the South China Sea, the potential for attacking Taiwan and so forth?
China was toying with Taiwan during Trump's last year in office. Mm-hmm. And even before that, General Mattis, when he was at the Pentagon, they were basically telling China, don't do something stupid, and don't get even China, they're master chess players too. And I think what they've been doing lately is flying their planes inside of Taiwan's airspace, 6 to 12 planes, jets.
Wow!
So they're toying with them now. They believe that. Oh, well, they are. And the United States, we're supposed to defend Taiwan. I don't know about Biden. I mean, what a perfect time for China to make the move.
That's the point, isn't it, of my question?
Yeah, exactly. So, this administration is not going to do anything of any significance. Do you think Xi and the Chinese leadership are worried about Biden? No way. Bought and paid for us. We don't have all the facts, but alleged bought and paid for.
Right.
So,
right.
They're problematic. And what they're doing right now, they're vaccinating the third world countries. I read an article this week in the Wall Street Journal that they are, a lot of these third world countries were kind of forgotten, like Pfizer and Moderna and others were taking care of the big European countries, Israel and the United States, and these third world countries were kind of forgotten. So look who's coming in, China. China's also given, I've heard former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley talk about the fact that the Chinese have loaned a lot of these third world countries. A lot of them have very important rare earth minerals,
Right.
a lot of money knowing they could never pay it off. And then when it comes to them owing it, they'll say, okay, look, we'll work with you on that debt, but we want to put a military base in your country. They did it in South America. They've done it around the world. So, and look how they penetrated our country. You know, they've got a plan. I remember when I was in commercial real estate, gosh, it was probably 30 years ago, we were showing, so I was in Dallas, but we were showing some Chinese, some property just outside of San Francisco. And this guy, these guys said, what would this area be like in 50 years? and then 100. We're 3 to 5 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
It just gives you an idea. They're patient. They got a plan, and they're long-term thinkers. They're so strategic. So, I mean, he was very serious. What's this area going to be like in 50 years? It was going to be a big investment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing, unfortunately, with a very, very shrewd adversary that's penetrated every part of our country, whether it's the educational system, politics, White House, Washington, Capitol Hill,
Real estate.
On and on. College campuses. Look at the money they've thrown at these universities. Dr. Kleber there at Harvard, he was the head of the chemistry department, making money from the Chinese government, Chinese Communist government,
Right.
operating out of the Wuhan facility in Wuhan, China. So I don't know. I don't know the final day of how it's all going to play out with China's role, but I can tell you one thing: they are an adversary like we've never had before, and they love this political division that we have in our country.
Absolutely.
This is just perfect, and they've helped do it. They've had their hands on it, whether it's through the election process or through the social networks or through their master propagandists. Very formidable.
You bring up the question of their involvement in terms of foreign interference in America's election. What are your thoughts on the Dominion voting machines and all that? How much do you think China was really involved in making the election outcome be what it was, be what it has become?
Well, Mike Lindell supposedly has spent a lot of money researching the forensics of the vote machines and the tabulation. And I know that there were certain people that had already spent a lot of money doing this. And then Lindell supposedly spent the money to confirm that information.
Mm-hmm.
I hope for his sake that they didn't make any mistakes, because the Dominion voting system, it's owned by Staple Street Capital. And the chairman of the board of Staple Street Capital, it was a guy named William Kennard. And he was Obama's ambassador to the EU, the first one we ever had. He was the head of the FCC when Bill Clinton was in office. And now he's the chairman of the AT&T board. And then this other company, Smartmatic, Lloyd Mark Malley, I think it is. He's a good friend of George Soros, and he's on the board of Smartmatic. Yeah, we're hearing these companies, Dominion and Smartmatic. I guess the question is, why do wealthy, influential Democrats want to have ownership in voting machine companies? What's the purpose? I don't know any of the Republicans that control these machines.
It's like
or the company,
right?
I don't know I don't know all the details, but we've heard a lot of rumors. Just both you guys have as well. I just pray that everything will be revealed. Luke 12:2, everything that's been hidden will be revealed in this process. They talk about, Steve Bannon talks about low-hanging fruit. I mean, just the processing of votes, not even getting into the equipment or the machines, is substantial amount of political fraud in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, right, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. I just pray, Doug, that it will all be revealed at some point, and hopefully soon. Indeed. And unfortunately, the legislatures, the Republican-led legislature, Republicans controlled the House and Senate in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it, and they didn't do anything. Only a couple people were willing to do it, but they didn't do it. And look at the repercussion.
It's amazing, isn't it, really? I guess the question is, why would a Republican legislative body in each of these states be unwilling to defend their constitutional privilege to identify how voting occurs and the counting process and all that? That's their responsibility. Yet in each of those cases, they all defaulted on that.
They were fearful of another violent year, just like last summer.
I think it was that.
Yes, absolutely. They were intimidated by the possibility of violence. A lot of the cities were boarded up on election day in case Trump won.
Yeah.
They were boarded up. They spent a fortune. And I tell you, I really believe that the possibility of violence of Antifa and some of these radical leftist groups intimidate them to the point, as well as the mainstream media. When they get on you, they don't let up. So that diabolic pair of the mainstream media and this leftist, well-informed potential of violence intimidated those state legislatures from doing the right thing.
Well funded too by George.
Oh, absolutely, and others.
Yeah. Let's shift over to our last topic of the night: the intelligence services, the CIA, and so forth. I like to go after the big ones. This is
Gary's stuff. This is Gary's.
Yeah, I was going to say, Gary. This is where I was going to kind of lean on you a little bit more here to talk a little bit about. Certainly, I've been paying quite a bit of attention to McDuff and to Daryl Hamamoto and so forth, as well as George Webb. A lot of research, a lot of work that they've done, just some truly staggering things that they've been uncovering. Anyway, jump in and talk a little bit about this. It's an area of special interest for you, having had people from the CIA actually work for you, unbeknownst to you.
Unbeknownst to me. Well, Doug, actually, you and I met because I saw your Branson, Missouri on JFK and the Nazis and what the Nazis had to do with the assassination of JFK.
Yeah, absolutely. The Perm Index and some of these other things, right?
You've written extensively, and of course your book Power Quest 1 and 2, I think, is the best book you ever wrote. You've written a lot of good ones. I've been a proofreader for you on the Final Babylon and some others, but Power Quest to me really says it all. I mean, you go back to the Vril societies and the secret societies and how all this stuff has manifested itself over the last 200, 300, 400, 500 years or more.
Right. Well, you're kind to say that. I'm
who is a partner with Webb on the channel there, and Dr. Hamamoto. And I've met all. I did not meet John, but I spent a weekend with Hamamoto and with Webb in San Diego, and he actually has an interview of me that I've never released publicly.
Oh, okay. Is there a reason why?
At Dearborn.
Okay, so now you can.
Yeah.
Okay, I look forward to that.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and release it. Cool. I mean, it puts my life out there on the line again, but I could care less at this point. So,
if it's coming soon, you might as well get there a little early.
That's it. I think we've seen what the intel agencies are all about over the last 5 years. And the
question is, what is it that they really want? And this is primarily, I think, more the CIA than it is the Defense Intelligence Agency or Naval Intelligence. I think it's more the CIA, which seems to be, in my view, the true shadow government.
Yeah, how do we know? How will we ever know? But based on the information that we have and our ability to try to discern, read between the lines, connect the dots, divine inspiration, whatever. Look, the CIA has been bad news from day one. We know how it started with the Dulles brothers.
Yep.
Truman signed the National Security Act in 1947, created the State Department and the CIA on the same day.
Recruited Reinhard Gehlen to be.
Reinhard Gehlen was part of the OSS.
Yeah, I mean, he was Nazi. Well, I mean, he was part of the SS.
He was the SS.
Brought into the OSS.
Right.
Then became the CIA.
Bill Donovan and Alan Dulles recruit Reinhard Gehlen, and that creates the International Bank of Settlements to launder the loot that they took from the Jews.
Yeah.
In Europe, the private banking, the Swiss banking, hide the money, launder the money.
Right.
Comey sitting on the board of HSBC, the opium bank for the British Empire out of Hong Kong. Come on. That's Comey's job before Obama appointed him.
Right.
Right. You know, NATO generals overthrowing Gaddafi, compliments of Hillary running an op, you know, Barack Obama standing off to the side, standing down the US military in 13 hours.
Right.
NATO generals, baby. Military industrial complex. Everybody's making money on inside trader or weapons deals or drugs or trafficking. That's what George Webb has uncovered. And that's why everybody's tried to smear him and pull down his material. Nobody wants to see this stuff.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say he makes the story blacker than black, you know, in terms
He
of
cracked the code. He went with network analysis. He went metadata, network analysis, right down to the crackberries, the encrypted blackberries that were being used by Hillary and her troop, her flying monkey troop, like the Wicked Witch of the Wizard of Oz.
the flying monkeys. I love it.
I swear the media must use the same encoded crackberry. You know, what's the key word today from Zuckerberg or from Zucker at CNN? Impeachment. And every news channel you turn to throughout the day, every word by every newscaster is impeachment. That's not by accident.
Right.
It shapes the narrative, right? Control the narrative, control the masses. So look, the intelligence agencies are so corrupt. And Bill, it goes back to, you know, Snowden. It goes back to Bill Binney, the NSA director that stood up for Snowden, and our friend that was mysteriously suicided, Phil Haney.
I don't know about Phil Haney. Can you guys talk about that?
Well, Phil Haney was the guy, and I forget the agency that he was involved with, but his Homeland Security, I believe.
It was.
And Haney's responsibility for a decade or two of his career was he was cataloging and monitoring all the activity in the mosques in the United States.
Oh,
okay. And Barack Obama didn't like it. And Haney went on vacation. And when he came back, they had deleted 20 years of work in the Homeland Security NSA databases. It vaporized. He went out and was a whistleblower, wrote a book, went public about this story. And how long ago? A year ago? He ended up mysteriously dead. Look, the intel agencies are running the country. The CIA has been the bad actor all along. And I know it up close and personal from Ed Dearborn. I know, you know, my dad's involvement in the Bay of Pigs. I mean, it's in my DNA, it's in my gut, it's in my life experience. I don't need to read another book. I don't, you know, the truth is what it is.
Well, it does seem like if we go back to, you know, the Project Mockingbird, let alone MK Ultra, but Project Mockingbird, some of the things that I wrote about, I think I wrote about these in PowerQuest too.
You did.
I've written about them in several books.
Come on, Doug, come out of the closet.
I know. I gotta throw in some things for myself. Yeah, but the CIA has basically designed I guess you could say, the downfall of a democratic America for over 50 years, and this has been really the CIA's role. And the question is, well, why would it be that role? Well, it's because the imperialist empires, which really is Great Britain, you know, it's really the Anglo-American Empire. Yeah. They've really been in control of the intelligence agencies since World War II. And certainly Kennedy was really the last stand against these intelligence agencies, becoming really the script writer for what's happened ever since.
That's exactly.
Yeah. And so you've essentially got the CIA has thousands of paid reporters throughout the world. That's what they do, is they basically
Ari Fleischer was going to write a book about this. He was going to update this. I tweeted Ari and said, "Hey Ari, look, we know back how many decades ago, how many reporters and news anchors were
back in the 1960s already."
Yeah. So can you update it in 2020? Who's on the payroll now of the CIA?
Yeah. Well, we got a media guy here. Bill, what are your thoughts on the whole issue of Mockingbird and the influence in the media And how many Mockingbird media types do you personally know?
That's an area that I don't focus on.
That's an area you can't touch, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I gave Bill a get out of jail free card.
Yeah, you did. Yep.
Told him, I said, if there's anything that I touch on that you really can't speak to, feel free to call me off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that hasn't been my focus.
Well, I wrote about that, so I'm still alive, by the way, guys. So you know,
that's why I'm on
that's encouraging. Wink's still with us, so that's.
Well, at this point, they can just laugh at us and they say, guys, we're so far ahead in this game. It doesn't matter who you bring in off the bench to play quarterback, Joe Montana, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, we're going to win this. At least that's what they think. Of course, they still have to deal with a God named Yahweh ultimately.
That's what it's come down to.
Yeah. But the CIA continues to be hugely impactful.
Now, just before we leave the CIA,
yeah, go ahead.
Bill, actually, you were on top of this with what Trump did in the final days in office to the CIA with the firing of Esper at the DOD, or resignation.
Yep.
There was a cleaning up and the mysterious disappearance.
Chris Miller, was that the fellow that took over?
You know, Haskell disappeared until she suddenly resigned the day of Biden's inauguration. Why don't you?
Is there a scoop on Gina Haskell's whereabouts, Bill, that you want to tell us about tonight?
No.
Okay, we won't. Again, I'm probing a little too deeply there, you know. So it's gonna be another show.
Yeah, that's another show. We need to get another panelist on that we can kind of.
I think it is interesting that, and I forgot the NSA order that Kennedy signed. Dark journalist Daniel List has done a great job on this, this topic. But basically, Trump shut down the CIA's ability to be involved in any covert operations. And he caught the Democrats in their own game. They couldn't stop it because it was already Kennedy's legislation written years ago.
Right.
And I got the numbers. The NSA.
Yeah, it was 201 or something like that. It was some internal memo 201.
Right.
That Daniel List, dark journalist, talked about. And Bill, if you haven't seen any of those dark journalist shows, we need to point you to a couple of those because he and Catherine Austin Fitts are partners in crime, basically.
Yeah,
good stuff.
Yeah, I think what was interesting is when Esper was let go. You know, there's a lot of rumors what Trump might do because of the election outcome. And when he was let go at the Pentagon with about a month, 6 weeks, a little bit more than that before the inauguration, and then replaced by Chris Miller, you know, a special forces guy.
Right.
There was a lot of hope that I guess hope might be one word, but just that there could be a purpose in all of this.
Yes.
And then and I think that's, I don't know, there was just a tremendous amount of speculation. Gary's right. They did the Pentagon was kind of restricting certain intel that they were sharing with the CIA, as far as I understand it.
Exactly.
Touching on that.
It was, I believe, Gary, it was Chris Miller was to report directly to the White House, and all intelligence to the White House was to come through him.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
And the Department of Defense.
Yes.
But what happened is we saw a major, big time attack on Trump by the media, by Wall Street titans, major bankers, corporations, attorneys and representative were under attack, exposing them to the point that you'll never do business again if you represent Trump or you work with Trump. I mean, there was law firms that bailed out that were helping him with the vote fraud cases, and I've never seen anything quite like it. And then, unfortunately, that January 6th event, the Capitol Hill fiasco with these radical crazies. I mean, you know, it was terrible. It was just absolutely the worst possible timing. And we'll find out a lot more. Unfortunately, more and more is coming out about what Pelosi knew, what the FBI knew, what Muriel Bowser, the Washington, D.C. mayor knew. They were worried about optics, but at the same time, they knew what was coming. It was a shock. And unfortunately, I mean, they piled on Trump that week. Oh my gosh. And then Michelle Obama, I think it was on the 7th, she said that Trump should be banned from all the social networks, Twitter, Facebook. And what happened within the next 48 hours?
You did it.
Trump was suspended and then banned for permanently. On Twitter, on Facebook. Unbelievable. That week, that was a week that we will never forget. And I think that Trump did have some plans, but I think even there was just some very significant arguments inside the White House. What can they do or what they should do with this situation? And
it was completely tying his hands.
Absolutely.
You know, and
even access to him.
Yes, it was
restricted. Yeah.
What did you, Bill, do you recall? It was very much in the same time frame. It was after the issue of what might have happened was it in Berlin, where they were theorizing the, I guess the Dominion servers or whatnot.
Oh, Frankfurt.
Yeah, Frankfurt. Yeah. Chris Miller made a comment at a press conference, turning to Mike Pence and thanking him for some of the most complex military, I'll call them maneuvers, maybe machinations, I'm not sure, but he thanked Pence and almost choked up because he was emotionally so, I guess, gratified for what Pence did. Did you follow that? Did you have any sense at all as to what that might have been about? Do you recall?
I didn't. I didn't follow that too closely. There was.
He's weaseling on us again, isn't he?
There were some rumors.
Yes, you can speculation. Nothing that you would, you would
just
subscribe.
Speculation.
Yes,
and I don't know any details. I just know there was speculation about voting machines in Frankfurt.
Could you sit a little closer up to the screen? I want to see the. I want to see the.
It's so close. Well, this was all. Related, maybe
special forces, special force involvement and some real.
How about the Da Vinci satellite network?
Yeah.
The
Italian legislator there's so much
that gets fired and
the Vatican role. I mean,
the Vatican, the Pope's arrested according to Steve.
There was so much. There was real news, and then there was the psyop stuff. And then unfortunately the overactive imaginations. And there's a lot of those guys.
It really was. A lot of people were connecting dots that they couldn't really be connected the way they were.
Not connectable. No. It got out of hand, and we're still hearing stuff.
Yeah.
We're still hearing stuff.
Oh yeah,
it'll be like the Warren Commission in 50 years. We're still hearing stuff.
Yeah. Well, there still are certain voices that are speaking, they sound like they're authoritative, that this was a subject I was going to mention to you guys. I thought you'd both probably duck when I brought it up. It was, do we have two presidents now? Is Biden really in control of the military? Or is the military really running themselves at this point in time? So I was going to bridge to that in terms of the Taiwan thing, but I guess the question really there is, of course, there was for the viewers, the listeners, the theory was that that Biden was shut out of the Pentagon, and that the military was not supporting his presidency, and that behind the scenes they're planning a coup. And so that was that's kind of the theory. Most of that theory was dismissed even by people that were hoping that it might be true. But there's still a few authorities out there, semi-authorities, that say it's still coming to pass. We'll see. But but the Georgia.
Well, that was kind of what we're hearing. That was kind of what we're hearing about Trump.
Right.
When he was in office, that there was going to be a military coup. I think I've been hearing about that for 3 years.
Yeah.
And it never happened. There was a concern that especially when Kelly and Mattis were very complimentary of Trump, that they might be trying to, there might be something in the works. So, boy, I don't know. We've never lived in a period of time like this. It is exciting and exciting
at the same
just to try to stay up with everything and everything. For the 25 years I've been doing what I've been doing, it used to have, Doug, and Gary as well. We might have a couple things that were prophetically relevant at the time in place or happening.
Yes.
And you kind of get informed. Yeah, within a year.
Yeah.
And the last couple of years, we've had a year's worth of news in a week, or we've had a year's worth of news in 2 weeks, or it's unbelievable. And I think, like I like to say, is all the key final day 10 or 12 markers that we're trained to watch through the Bible are in play. With so many things and so many events that are significant biblically, we're living in the most important time in Bible prophecy history. And unfortunately, with the least amount of interest in the church. But for us that know what to watch based on the Word of God, everything's in play. All the major things we discussed earlier: one world financial order, one world order, one world political order, one world religious order, the mark of the beast, the digital currencies, pandemics, pestilence, wars and rumors of wars. It's all happening and right before our eyes. It's an incredible time to be alive and watching all this with great excitement and expectation.
Indeed. Gary, what are your final thoughts on our discussions and our thoughts? What do you think we should do this again?
I'm very much like-minded. I've come at it a little differently than you guys have, but there's a congruence here amongst us, no matter what our background, our education, our experience, our life experiences. We seem to all be aligned that that's where we are right now.
Right. No doubt about it. We are living in, as the Chinese would say, we are living in the most interesting times. So, well, guys, it's been just fantastic to have you join me tonight. I've had a delightful time. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as well. And
thank you.
You bet. Absolutely. My pleasure and my privilege. Bill, for folks that want to get to know more about you and your service and your ministry, how do they find you?
Our website address is watch.org. It's WATCH.org. And also we post news 365 days a year. And I also put out a weekly news report every Friday afternoon. That's a 15 to 20 page weekly summary of world news that happened this and each week that was biblically relevant.
Great. And can anybody sign up for that, or do you have to have a special decoder card or something?
It is a subscription. It's $1 a week on a 12-month subscription, and $1.25 a week on a 6-month subscription.
But if you want to get non-Mockingbird media information, that $1 a week's worth it's worth its.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've been a subscriber a long time, and Bill saves me 1,000 hours. I can't keep up with the news cycle like he does as a White House press reporter. So his ability to consolidate this down like a Kiplinger letter, so that I can get to the meat of what I need to know. It's a big value.
It's good stuff.
Thanks, Bill. You did
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
So thanks, gentlemen. God bless you all. And to the folks that have been watching us, I hope you've enjoyed this too. And hopefully that our discussion has been a blessing to you. And so we'll do it again. I'll see if I can get these guys to come back sometime, and we'll talk some more about Wink's experience in Moscow. It's pretty fascinating. All right. Good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.